तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। Om. Welcome to this webinar where we are going to take a look at SQ, Spiritual Quotient, which is spiritual intelligence measured and calibrated and brought out as a figure. SQ and SI otherwise are synonymous. Spiritual quotient is a measure of spiritual intelligence, and we must right at the outset recognize that the Vedānta, the spiritual science, actually tells us we are primarily a spiritual principle. Secondarily, we have this personality of body and mind. The Upanishads have always talked about something in us which is the core of our being, which is way above body, senses, mind, and even breathing, pranas, and so on. Mundaka Upanishad, for example, has a mantra. Divyo hi amurta purushaha sabhahyabhyantara ajaha apranaha amanaha shubhraha aksharat paratha paraha. Apranaha. We look at ourselves and we find we are alive because we are breathing. So we are so conscious and so identified with breath as the sign of life. But the Vedānta, which is another name for Upanishads, declares that is your spiritual ignorance, for you do not know who you really are at the depth of your being. You are so attached and identified with this body, and then some thoughts and emotions, and then the breathing, energies, and so on. So billions and billions of dollars are being spent in the upkeep of the body, in ensuring that people have good energy, people live longer, and the so-called health, which is way below holistic health. All right. So one statement that I am never tired of quoting is where someone observed, we are not human beings aspiring for a spiritual experience. On the contrary, we are spiritual beings presently going through a human experience. We are primarily the spirit. In that context, this webinar's topic is all the more significant, for it touches upon what every one of us here is endowed with, but then it's only a matter of how much of it is tapped, how much of it is made to express, how much of it is manifesting. Vivekananda or Ramana Maharshi, Jesus Christ or the Buddha, and we are that one single principle of spiritual truth. But in their case, the truth expressed itself. In our case, there is a struggle going on. And all spiritual studies are meant to ease out this struggle and to facilitate the removal of various self-created obstacles to the expression of this spiritual intelligence. So we are wondering what this SQ is after all. So let me begin showing some slides to you this session. Let me see. Yes. So we are looking at SQ, the ultimate intelligence. For there are several kinds of intelligence, as we know, and IQ and EQ have been much discussed in the world. IQ is the old chap. People have been valuing IQ for many, many centuries. In the last 30 or 40 years, EQ, emotional quotient, is also very much valued in not only academic environments, but also in the corporate environment, or for that matter, in any field. A person is assessed by both IQ and EQ these days. We will not go into much details of IQ and EQ, but it should suffice to say in IQ, it is the intellectual, rational abilities that are counted to solve logical problems, strategic challenges, and by and large, though this may not be 100% true statement, by and large, these abilities are located in the left hemisphere of the brain. Therefore, L for left, L for logic. Then there comes EQ, the intelligence about feelings. EQ is not feelings, it is the intelligence about understanding and managing feelings of ourselves or of others, to act with empathy, to act with compassion, to motivate, to lift somebody's spirits, to make somebody unwilling to, let's say, do some good work, get going with the work, he then becomes willing. That is what motivation is all about. So IQ and EQ, EQ being by and large located in the right brain. Vedanta would say it expresses in the right brain maybe. Vedanta would always think of these faculties, these abilities as inherent in the soul. Even when the body is dead and burnt away or buried away, the soul moves on, and the IQ, EQ, and for that matter SQ also, that the soul had and expressed through the brain of the previous life, these three quotients, these three faculties move on to the next life. And the law of karma and the supreme intelligence in this universe ensures that for expression of these IQ, EQ, and SQ, again, a sophisticated brain to match these levels will be supplied to that soul. Therefore, there is a matching between what is available in the soul. We are talking of the transmigrating soul, the conditioned soul, not the supreme soul of Advaita Vedanta, which is pure awareness, which has no programming at all. It's unconditioned. We are talking of the transmigrating jiva, individual soul, that ensures, or its karmas ensure, that it gets a matching physical body, brain, and other limbs, organs, and so on. Now comes in this progression of IQ, EQ, and so on, the third SQ, spiritual quotient. And apparently, studies have shown when somebody's spiritual intelligence is operating in various instances, various case studies, or on various occasions, when the research subject, a man or a woman or a child, the research subject is having spiritual inspiration, having creative thoughts, having out-of-box approaches, and is exhibiting tremendous concern, love, compassion, and so on, not necessarily related to any particular organized religion. Somebody can be very compassionate without taking the name of Lord Jesus or Rama or Krishna. And if somebody takes or utters the name of Allah or Jesus or Shiva or Devi, no problem. Spiritual intelligence is not necessarily connected to the organized religions, symbols, and concepts. So, it has been found in recent studies that SQ actually has oscillations, synchronous electrical oscillations going on in the brain, not only on the left side or right side, several places, and those synchronous oscillations, that means the oscillations at different parts of the brain are in sync. They rise and they fall at the same time. The crest of one wave and the crest of another wave and the crest of a third wave, all the crests as well as the lower points are at the same point of time. That is what is meant by synchronous oscillations in the brain. We have MEG technology these days, magnetoencephalograms, and so on. Using such techniques, they measure the electrical signals or maybe other signals too in the neural network. And in the brain, as this third bullet of the slide shows, at several places you have oscillations of particular kind. One of the pioneer writers in this field, Professor Dana Zohar, writes that those oscillations have been discovered to be of 40 cycles per second. 40 cycles, 40 hertz, so to say. Very interesting. There are so many new interesting things found about the brain by modern science, but what interests us who are more engaged in spiritual studies is those discoveries of science go so parallelly with things that our rishis, our sages, our mystics had to say from time immemorial. So, is there a relation between IQ, EQ, and SQ? We would say because they are in a progression, the one that comes later or one that is discovered later actually is a superior faculty, and it makes the one that was anyhow known before, the grosser one, it makes the previous one more effective. If one has higher EQ, then one uses one's IQ more effectively. Just as you and I, let us say, have some skill. Somebody knows a little engineering, and suppose he has good human relationship skills. He has good language, and he is able to connect with people. He is well motivated. Then isn't it true that the engineering knowledge that he anyhow had becomes much better used by this person? He will be able to take it far and wide. In fact, these days, and all the more after this COVID started, there is a tremendous increase in online education. And one of the online education organizations, let me try to remember its name. Yes, it is called Open Pathashala. Open Pathashala is one among many platforms where some programs are free, but a lot of programs you pay some amount. You can learn Sanskrit, somewhere else music, somewhere else yoga, somewhere else spiritual topics. And of course, whole lot of secular subjects can be learned on online platforms. And other day I took a look at a short trailer of Open Pathshala. They actually beautifully, pictorially, graphically, they show how, imagine there is a Sanskrit teacher in a village, very good at the subject and loves to teach, has many things with him, his repertoire, his skills, his material is quite good. But so far he has been teaching just a few students in the village or some nearby town. And Open Pathshala says, we take such a teacher from a village and bring him on our platform. And then this same teacher who used to teach just in 30 miles radius near his village now teaches people all over the world. He teaches students in Canada, in London, in Singapore, in Australia, and all that is made possible by us, Open Pathshala. They have an advertisement like that. I mentioned this because that is about online platforms, but a similar relation is between IQ and EQ. If somebody's EQ were to be less, somebody does not have skills of emotional intelligence, then even though he or she, for that matter, has good knowledge of some subject, he won't be able to go far. In that sense, EQ empowers somebody to use IQ more effectively. And now go further. If you have high SQ, again, it's not a matter of putting aside your EQ and IQ. Rather, you use both IQ and EQ more effectively for your own happiness sake, for the sake of the well-being of larger and larger number of people. So with this in mind, we take a little closer look at this SQ. As you know, SQ, spiritual quotient, has the adjective spiritual. But what is spiritual? We say of the spirit. All right, what is the spirit then? It is to be understood, spirit, the Sanskrit word for it is Atma. Kim tad Brahma, kim adhyatmam, says Arjuna in a question that he raises in chapter 8. What is adhyatma? Calling it adhyatma or calling it Atma? Atma kaha is a standard question in the Vedānta works. And the masters have always said, look, the Atma is the animating vital principle in our personality. Just as an iron box may have its weight, may have its shape, may have its inner structure, but if there were to be no electricity, the iron box would not be able to do the job of pressing clothes. Likewise, in our human personality, the body and mind, the brain and the lungs, the kidneys and the heart, all and everything about our personality would be just non-functional if there were to be no spirit. Spirit is life, therefore. That which gives life to the physical organism, the breath of life, other than material elements. And to operate from that depth of that enlivening principle is the crux of the matter when it comes to SQ. But why do we need SQ? Someone may say, we just need to have enough intelligence to manage matters of the world and to relate well. That is possible with EQ. Therefore, in white letters, the slide says here, life demands much more than ordinary relationships, excellence in relationships, and handling money and matters. Sometimes we need to ourselves change basically, dramatically, fundamentally, then only our sorrow will come to an end. Otherwise, by solving a problem here or solving a problem there, by making some small changes, temporary changes, we would not end sorrow for good. After 2 days, we are back with a new problem. Therefore, we say SQ has certain transformative power. The deeper we go to ourselves. In fact, in emotional intelligence itself, one component that is talked of by all the experts is emotional self-awareness. In spiritual intelligence, we take that very idea of awareness to deeper levels, not just being aware of our emotions, but if we could be aware of our deepest aspirations. Presently, a certain emotion might be rising in us. Presently, I might want a car, I might want a big house. Presently, I might want some kind of recognition, appreciation. Presently, there may be some desire rising in me. But on a deeper level, whether it was something else 10 years ago, a car today, and 10 years later in future, I might be desiring something. What is the common thread between all these different desires which came to my mind in life from childhood onwards? To be aware of that common thread. All my life, what have I been seeking primarily? What Eknath Ishwaran called DDD, deep driving desire. The deep driving desires in childhood might have expressed as a desire for some toys, and as the boy got older, it might express as a desire for a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler or a gun. But what is the essential quality of that deep driving desire? That is what we mean by being able to notice our own aspirations on a deeper level. That awareness becomes a part of the spiritual intelligence. And more deeply we are aware of what's going on in us, more is the transformation. SQ has certain transformative power, shaking our paradigms. How does that happen? Through asking fundamental questions. That is how in Mundaka Upanishad you have Shaunaka asking Angirasa, what is it knowing which everything becomes known? Kasminnu bhagavo vidnate sarvamidam vidnatam bhavati is the $1,000,000 question, so to say, in Atharvana Vedas, Mundaka Upanishad. So we will slowly make it clear what SQ is all about. We have dropped a few hints now, but to quickly brush up once more, when we are operating in the domain of enhanced EQ, it is considered a primary process. Very primarily, all of us, even those who have a grim face outside, inwardly are emotional people. And emotions are operating, it's a very primary process, and they have associative neural wiring. And then it is said in modern science, it is able to recognize a whole pattern. You enter a hall, you look around, there are men, there are women, there are very well-dressed people, and somebody has a drink in hand, somebody has a cigarette in hand. In 2 seconds, you get a picture of the whole place, and the emotional intelligence in you operates about what kind of gathering this is, what kind of assembly this is, what kind of place I have come to. So this is pattern recognition. It's an amazing power we have. IQ, in contrast, is a secondary process of the brain, and it has what is called serial neural wiring, and therefore it goes step by step. Though people with high IQ seem to be doing it so quickly in a jiffy, actually, scientifically, the IQ operates serially. They take pieces of information and quickly process, putting them one after another and coming to a conclusion. The so-called pattern recognition is not its primary trait. Now we are concerned with SQ. As I already said before, here different parts of the brain have synchronous neural oscillations. Synchronous, to say once more, is at the same time simultaneous and in step. Imagine on the surface of water, two waves are arising. When this wave is rising, therefore that wave is going down. That is asynchronous. If it is going up and B is going down, that would be quite opposed, 180-degree difference. But there could be 90 degree, there could be 45 degree. So in science, some of us have studied, waves are talked about as being in phase, PHASC, being in phase, being out of phase, being 90-degree, lag or lead. So in that context, you have something called synchronous. Together they rise, together they fall, and at different parts of the brain. And this amazing intelligence, marked by such synchronous neural oscillations, is neither uh, parallel nor serial, it is unitive. It puts everything together and goes to the depth of the matter. Therefore, we say all these concepts of organized religions, however sacred they may be regarded by large numbers of people, a concept, a symbol, an associated idea is finally nurtured by thought. People think, and particular people get more attached to particular symbols because of some conditioning. From childhood onwards, they have been told by their parents, relatives, that such and such sound, such and such symbol, such and such name, such and such place is holy, and so on. But spiritual intelligence cuts through all these man-made programming. It goes to the very essence of the matter. Not because of propaganda, not because uncles and aunts, mother and father, and other people around you had told you, but out of your own ability to listen to feel the vibrations of something, you discover a whole lot of things about a place or people or symbols and so on. So SQ has no necessary connection to religion. Somebody may go a lot to temples. He may not have high SQ. Somebody going a lot to temples may have SQ also. Therefore, going to temples, doing mantra japa, or wearing some special religious dress, having some titles, etc., being what they call initiated by some guru and so on, hundreds of those things, they may play a role in a little way, but SQ is an independent faculty. Many humanists and even atheists who did not believe in God had and have high SQ. And it is to be acknowledged that over thousands of years or tens of thousands of years, humanity has been progressing. The total consciousness, collective consciousness of humanity actually has been shaped by SQ2. SQ has wired us to become what we are today. You may say, if so much SQ has gone into making what we are today, we should have been good people. I would retort this way. If much SQ had not gone into making what we are today, we would have been much worse. The impact of many mystics and many saints, many sages, many holy people, many well-meaning people through these thousands and thousands of years has saved us from getting very barbaric or too selfish or blatantly violent and so on. So let's look at the good side of us at this moment in this 21st century, and that has been wired us, or we have been wired to be whatever we are by SQ2. Now, in Indian wisdom, there is a lot of impetus, lot of encouragement, lot of facilitating SQ, the tapping of SQ. Indian spiritual tradition has not been top down. Therefore, even today, we don't have a single guru for all Hindus. There are so many gurus, so many Shankaracharyas, Ramanujacharyas or Jiyas, so many Madhvacharyas, so many Acharyas, Pitadipatis, and there are so many gurus. Hindus are generally enjoying a lot of freedom, lot of choice, and their scriptures have always encouraged the Hindus to ask questions. Pariprashnena is a word in Gita, chapter 4, verse 34. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena. Lord Krishna is openly telling Arjuna, ask questions, pariprashna. Pari means from all directions. Ask questions from all angles of view and get your doubts cleared. Of course, not in a disrespectful manner. So pranipata, seva are mentioned. Approach teachers, give them the due respect, behave in a proper manner. But when you have a doubt, don't think you are not supposed to ask the doubt. Ask it. Ask the question. And Kenopanishad says, really, all strength comes from within. Atmana vindate viryam is a punchline from Kenopanishad. In the Gita, coming back to the song Celestial, Sri Krishna says, God, in fact, lives in the heart of everybody. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriddeshe Arjuna tishtati. Chapter 18. So these are marks of a culture, marks of a certain setting where spiritual intelligence is promoted. No wonder, in spite of some confusion, chaos, poverty, and many other disturbances in our society, even today, every few years, we find a new Mahatma of some extraordinary merit rising on the horizon. Men and women. You have somebody like Mata Amritanandamayi, born to a fisherman's community, went up to only standard 4 in school, but her spiritual acumen, her touch, her healing touch across the globe, and even her presiding over quite a huge organization with a smile on her face, etc., is extraordinary. This was not made possible by some legislation or by some kind of structured, raising of some saint, raising of a saint. Therefore, sometimes it is said, saints are born, not made. You can't make a saint. Saints are born. That doesn't mean ashrams and spiritual centers have no role to play. They always facilitate, and if somebody is born with some virtues, quite possibly an ashram paves the way for him. Many a time, somebody with certain potential finds an ashram a very important help at a phase of his or her life. It pushes him further. then he or she may not stay with that organization. That's a very different matter. But institutions play a certain role. But the operation of spiritual intelligence is way beyond the reach of institutions and organizations. So here we have a little discussion once more on the human brain. It is said that the research subjects are exposed to spiritual themes. They are discussing, and some of them are very inspired. At that time, using appropriate instruments, it has been found that certain areas in the neural network in the brain light up. Light up may not mean literally light there, but the instrument which is applied there may indicate a high voltage, a higher signal level, which can be then shown as light on the screen of the instrument. So either way, literally or figuratively, areas of the brain getting lighted up. And they also talked about some specific areas and called them the God spot. Now, it is nothing to do, as the second bullet says, about existence of God over there. God spot is a word that people have coined to indicate areas in the brain which get extra active when spiritual discussion, especially in an inspiring manner, happens in them, in their mind. So that evolved part of the brain to ask ultimate questions. Our brain indeed is a fascinating organ. We have in this slide picture of a certain scientist of Indian origin, though settled in California, San Diego, V.S. Ramachandran. Couple of times his name was given for the possibility of a Nobel Prize. He did not get the Nobel Prize, but even to be nominated for Nobel Prize in Science is something. He had done exhaustive study of the human brain, and one of the things for which he was known, this was many years ago, was about phantom limbs. Many of you may know what is a phantom limb. For those who do not know, let me tell briefly. Phantom limb is a very funny affair. Somebody's left leg, let us say, has been amputated because of some disease. Amputated. So that left leg is gone. All that pain in the left leg also seems to have gone. But now, after a year or after 6 months, the man comes and says to the doctors, I can see with my eyes that I don't have my left leg, but when I am resting, I distinctly feel that my left foot is aching. Though I open my eyes, there is no left foot at all. But my left foot, my left leg is aching very badly. So that kind of scenario was then described as phantom limb. The left leg all the way till the foot is removed, no doubt. But portions of the brain which were responsible for monitoring the left leg are still there. So when in that portion of the brain connected or associated with the left leg, there is some particular activity, the subject feels that there is ache in the left leg. So strange are the ways in which so-called external phenomena are connected to the so-called inner perceptions in the brain. Bhagavad Gita therefore makes some very, very philosophical statement. The supreme truth in chapter 13 it is said, Neyam yattat pravakshyami yajnatva amritamashnute anadimat param brahma. And what is quoted here is Nasat tat na asaduchyate. I have split the sandhi, otherwise it's very tricky to even read. Nasat tanna asaduchyate. Nasat tat na asad uchyate. It's neither manifest nor unmanifest. It's neither the known nor the unknown. It is that intelligence which is the basis for the two categories, things known and things unknown, things that are expressed and things that are in a hidden form. For all this, there is a basis, that is Brahma, says Gita. Chāndogya, the father Uddalaka, also says the ultimate truth is not a void, not a shunya, but sat. Though it may not have a boundary, it may not have specific form, sound, color, etc. But there is some sat, and from sat came everything, from existence only. Now, a couple of issues on how does SQ show? When there is SQ, that is, deeper we go in a proper way, in a balanced way, we become capable of handling a situation in many ways. Our rigidity leaves us, we become flexible. So I said carefully, because sometimes when we are irresponsible also, we become flexible. We have some funds with us. Somebody comes and says, may I take this? And suppose we say, oh yeah, take it away. He took away the 3 lakhs that we had with us. Tomorrow for some expenditure, we don't have money. Then you say, I don't know why I said yes. That is irresponsible and careless. But if in a proper way somebody rises to high SQ, possibly he parts with lot of money, but with a deep understanding, and time will prove that his decision was good, though for a while it caused disturbance. We can be visionaries. So you have revolutionary thinkers, Guru Nanak Dev, Sant Kabir, Basaveshwara in South India, and some mystics like Lal Ded in Kashmir Shaivism. Visionaries, their poetry, their experiences, their connection with God was at once sweet as well as highly uplifting. We can be creatively spontaneous, not articulated by thinking and calculating. Spontaneous. It comes out so easily, but there's a master stroke when it comes out. And today, a lot of people are able to feel that spiritual impulse in them, and they may not belong to any religion. So among youngsters in today's world, especially in the Western world, a new acronym has come into usage, SBNR. You ask somebody, are you a Christian? Are you a Jewish person? The person may tell you, I am SBNR. I am spiritual but not religious. Don't call me a Jewish or Christian or Muslim person. I am spiritual, but I don't belong to any religion. That spirit or that flavor of such an answer is good, but finally one has to find out whether the person really is mature or is playing with words. In the last slide for this session, ISQ is all about living on a higher plane, and one of the challenges in life is suffering, depression, and so on. And as great mystics would say, as our spiritual quotient rises, increases, we don't try to escape from suffering, nor do we add fuel to the fire and suffer more, but we stay with suffering. There is something called staying with suffering without doing palayanam, escaping, and in staying with suffering with alertness and attention, something happens which you don't plan, but there takes place a certain inner change. It's thus the capacity to face and transcend pain. That's what happens. When you face truly, something inside changes and you transcend pain. Whereas if you go for an escape and somehow you ensure that the pain comes down, the sorrow and suffering come down, after some time again they may rise. And thus, in SQ, we will be able to deal with scenarios. The third bullet says, we see connection between diverse things, which is called holistic vision. We can be field independent. That is, field means conventions, customs. This is how people have done. This is how the organization has been doing. This is how my predecessors did. This is how last 50 years everybody in this position did. This is how our mind gets a little limited, which has its own place. One has to be aware of one's tradition, but in SQ, something deeper can take control of scenarios. Lastly, we rise above materialism. Then only it can be called spiritual. The obsession with the immediate, the material, the selfish manipulation of things or people, that goes away. Spiritual quotient is thus a great release inside us. We become free of all these clutches of the materialistic forces. Therefore, somebody long back had written a book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. A word was coined. Spiritual materialism. What is spiritual materialism? You run a church, you run an ashram, you run a mosque, you run an NGO, you run some kind of organization apparently meant for doing good to the society, but there, if you really actually are amassing wealth, trying to get famous, that would be a spiritual materialism. So someone wrote, how to cut through spiritual materialism. After all, that's not good for anyone. With this, let me pause, and as we always do, the session is open for some comments and questions. Hari Om. Let's see who has the first. Somebody had sent a question to me before the webinar began. I find some friends going to temple regularly, but they are not compassionate. So how come they have high SQ, but they are not compassionate? Going to temples, I clarified in the lecture, is not a sign of high SQ. That doesn't mean one should not go to temples. Going to temples has its place. Hopefully it will help him. But if somebody is not compassionate, somebody is selfish, materialistic, insensitive, just brushes aside any mention of someone suffering near them, around them, then we say that in spite of going to temples and doing rituals, that person's SQ has not opened up yet, not risen yet. So SQ is not to be defined at all in the first place in gross external terms. Okay, Asha has a text question. Oh, there are several texts. Begin with Sachin Dev Chavan. With live practical examples, how do you differentiate EQ and SQ? Yeah, Sachin Dev. See, it is just like what do you call as out of box? What do you call something extraordinary? It's a personal judgment, something that strikes you as unusual. There are a lot of people doing good work, but somebody does some good work in some unusual fashion. The length to which he goes is something that raises our eyebrows. That would be good to qualify that for SQ. Then, does secularism emerge from SQ? No. See, that's a good question actually. On one hand, we say SQ is not necessarily connected to religion, but it is not necessarily connected to secularism or atheism too. So you could be a believer, you could be a non-believer. You could be going to temples, you could be just keeping away from temples. That is not an issue. So secularism has not emerged from SQ, but SQ would not have any problem with secularism. SQ is comfortable with religion, it's comfortable with secularism. But it's not comfortable with injustice to anybody. Because injustice can take place to some X or Y by people standing under the canopy of religions as well as people who don't believe in God or anything. Communists also can hurt a society, and people belonging to some religion also can hurt the society or a person. So SQ is about enhanced sensitivity. One doesn't hurt others. But as far as one's beliefs are concerned, one could be having religious beliefs, or one might somehow keep away. Does an atheist with high SQ realize Atma? Atma as Paramatma? If yes, then he is not atheist. Oh, Sachin Dev has many questions. Yes, technically he can realize, but he will not be able to articulate in the way traditional people do. But after examination, we find that you see, traditionists would then say that this guy who never attended any Vedanta class, who never came to any satsang, has this vision, Purva Janma. God has given him this realization. So this label is put by traditionists upon him. Last question by Sachin Davis. Is God in my heart? Then what is Sahasrara Chakra, brain? That is a little elaboration. What is in the heart can then express, starting from Mooladhara to Sahasrara. It is like, a center, like New Delhi is the center for certain power. But during a certain phase of some operations, the operations of that center in New Delhi, the nation's capital, could begin with Trivandrum. Second phase of the operation of that center could be at Bhopal. Third could be at Jabalpur, and so on. Then he's everywhere. So Ramana Maharshi has thrown light on this in Ramana Gita. He says the Atma is resident in the heart, but then it expresses from Mooladhara to Sahasrara. So going to the very essential dimension of it, it is in the heart. Going to manifest expressions of it, it could be at the bottom of the backbone, which is Mooladhara, and the 6 chakras, last one being Sahasrara. Rampai, if SQ has wired us to be what we are now, how is that distinguished from Vasana or even Prarabdha Karma? What is the way to increase it in this life or for future lives? Is it even carried from one life to another? Oh, is it even? Oh. Okay, that question ends there. Yeah, these are not in contradiction. You and I can increase our SQ, and by reducing our previous vasanas, we express more SQ, and whatever we do, our growth gets reflected on the society. We influence the society, society influences us. So the way the entire humanity is moving and the way particular individuals evolved and got even liberation are not in contradiction. So their contributions impacted the society. During a phase of their biography, the society was of benefit to them, was helpful to them. And SQ I mentioned in my lecture too. We do carry to next life. The IQ, EQ, SQ, all of them go with us. So somebody who had done a lot of sadhana in this life, in his next life, he will pick things so easily. He will be like duck taking to water. What is field independence? I was about to give in my lecture. M.K. Gandhi was in today's Bangladesh when the independence took place. Practical example. A Muslim father came crying. It's shown in the movie The Gandhi, crying that my only son has been killed by the Hindus. Gandhi asked him to stand by the side. After some time, a boy comes crying, both my parents have been killed, and he is a Hindu boy. Now, conventional thinking, field-dependent thinking would be how to find for this Hindu boy some Hindu parents, how to find for this Muslim father a Hindu child as maybe a substitute. Gandhi goes beyond the field because for him, Hindus and Muslims were like brothers, equals. So he says to the Muslim father who lost his child, why don't you adopt this boy, Hindu boy, who lost his parents? So this is one example of how conventional boundaries, So if somebody does lot of fuss about intercaste marriage, is field dependent. If somebody is broad-minded, not irresponsible, he recognizes the place of cultures, upbringing, etc. But after examining the case, he says the boy and the girl truly like each other, love each other, they are compatible. Don't make caste or some religion a big issue. That is field independent. Asha has a question. What is the role of faith in SQ? Secondary. Faith always plays a secondary, but sometimes it can be important. Because of faith, you examine more. If you had no faith, you would say, I don't think it works. So the impetus for checking out, examining again, let me see whether it works, is made possible by faith. So SQ and faith are related in this way. Faith can be a catalyst for the operation of SQ. Next. Even every society has a few people who are godly or called Deva, concerned about samashti than themselves. Are these people with high SQ without being spiritual? Without being, okay. Yeah, that question ends here. In this box, sometimes I don't know where the question ends. No, the SQ without being religious. They may not be into any religion. High SQ right away means they are very spiritual. So one can be like that expression went, spiritual but not religious. One can be having high SQ, which is same as high spirituality, but it need not express as religious practices, symbols, attire, manners, etc. Yeah, whoever, like your question says, whoever was concerned with samashti than themselves, they had a greater SQ in that respect. SQ also has many components. They may not be spiritually evolved in all respects, but that particular dimension does speak of a certain spiritual eminence. Guru Prasad, does spiritual quotient activate extrasensory powers to go beyond time and space? Yeah, it may. It may need not, but it may. It has that capacity. Yeah. SQ has the capacity to unleash clairvoyance, telepathy, and many other siddhis too. Prashant Ranade, how does one reconcile between achieving high SQ and staying materialistic to fulfill one's responsibility? No problem. You reconcile by putting away greed. As there is higher SQ, you will very clearly see this I need to discharge a responsibility towards a duty, towards being fair to my family, whereas this and this in a list of 10 things, they are greed. Neither my family members are asking for it, nor do I need it, but a fancy has got into me. Or sometimes family members may ask, But if you have high SQ, you clearly see this person, this child of mine, this daughter of mine. No, she really doesn't need, but she has been influenced by her friends. Therefore, you will distinguish with high SQ. Therefore, you will very nicely, maybe in a non-confronting manner, you will handle that and maybe persuade your son or daughter not to press that particular demand. That's how you will go about it. You will be able to divide what is sensible and what is utterly greedy. That's what this intelligence helps. Katyayani. Ultimately, it is the inner journey that brings ultimate bliss. Can you repeat and reinforce a few steps we can take towards that journey, Swamiji? For now, I will not say several steps. The most important thing is moment-to-moment alertness. Rather than being caught by regrets, memories, etc., rather than being pulled down by some self-judgments, oh, I am no good, or some other, be in the present, don't be carried away by self-judgments, and that alertness, that what we call non-judgmental awareness, non-judgmental self-awareness. If you feel lonely one morning, that's no problem. You look at your loneliness, but you don't add masala to it. You don't spice it up further, saying that this loneliness has been hitting me for now 7 or 8 years. This is hereditary, I know. This has come from my father, for grandfather, and this kind of mental chatter will come in the way of enhancing SQ. I'm feeling lonely. Or another day, all of us feel. So suddenly we feel, I have messed up my life. I tried to do something, but finally ended up nowhere. Something like that. No problem. Just learn the art of noticing the thoughts with least interference. And then some understanding will dawn upon you. That will take you higher and higher on SQ journey. Dr. Pai once again says, SDNR, I think, is a play of words. Swami Vivekananda said, religion is an expression of divinity within you. You cannot be spiritual without being religious. I very much am aware of this view. In fact, in your town, Tampa, I had come across one or two others also who expressed this view. I fully appreciate that view also. But it is like this. Some mindsets are such. They got an allergy to religious rituals or God, Rama, Krishna, etc. So, out of compassion, God gives to them a different way of, nurturing their own spiritual aspiration. If they don't have an allergy, if you don't have any prejudice against Vedic rituals, etc., they would find that those rituals help them to go fast. I agree with you. But there are always some people who have somehow an inbuilt resistance. No, they should not be left totally, left in the lurch. They should also be given an education, spiritual education, freed from concepts, pictures, etc. Though there is really no problem with those concepts. Just like if somebody, lastly, has allergy to idols. So we is taking a hand to our head, we say, all right, if you don't like any idol, okay, you go to that room and pray. We are all praying here. Baba, go and pray there. God bless you. So if somebody has an allergy to idols, we say we don't want to leave him out. We don't want to say get out of here. We give him another room where is no calendar, no picture, no Rama, no Krishna. He prays in his own way. Thank you for a very thought-provoking submission. Ashok Kulkarni and Ashwini Kulkarni. Okay. How to improve SQ? Is it right to improve SQ? You improve SQ by being more and more in the present, as I answered before. And improve your SQ, to improve your SQ is necessary. SQ is a great solution to a lot of our worldly afflictions. Suvarnaji, SQ would work more with balance and calm mind to think deeper and evolve. That's right. It gives us larger picture and we operate with more balance and calm. Jaya Hari Madhur, why worry about others? You be compassionate and project onto others. Yeah, so don't have to worry. If you are compassionate, you will respond to the needs of others around you. I agree. I was taken aback by your comment calling spiritual journey as a struggle. Yeah. I think every journey has at least some parts of it, taking the form of a struggle. Not everywhere. Yeah, yes. In spiritual journey, they even use words like agony. Even great mystics have said the pangs of separation from God. Who was that in Christian history? Some Saint Thomas, somebody in the jail. In the jail, he wrote some poems, agony of many kinds. So struggle need not be in a negative sense. Struggle has its own divine side to it. Okay, Katyayani has thanked. Vasumana says, how SQ gets developed in a person? It's more we are ready to learn from life, SQ develops. If we are not ready to learn, something happens to us, we roll up our sleeves and we plan to teach somebody a lesson. We don't ask, what is the lesson I learn here? SQ gets limited. SQ grows by being ready to learn, which doesn't mean you eat humble pie. It doesn't mean you accept defeat. You don't have to accept defeat, nor do you have to be sore with people who put you to some trouble. They did whatever they did. God bless them. You and I, suppose, are able to learn. All right, where is it that I was wrong, even if it's a little bit? I want to improve. I want to correct myself. Then SQ increases. Dr. Aruna Ramesh, how can one improve SQ? Will study of Vedanta and realizing it improve? Definitely. Vedanta, like this lecture also was half Vedanta after all. Study of Vedanta is one grand way. There are many ways. You learn from everywhere. Study of Vedanta is an excellent, structured way which has stood the test of time for thousands of years. Jyoti Verma. In our day-to-day life, IQ and EQ is heard a lot in the corporate world. How can one introduce SQ to the corporate world? Yeah, study SQ first. If once you are clear what SQ is, so you need to study a lot more. Then you will see in your company's affairs, at your home, at the society, you will see this is a typical case for applying that teaching of SQ. Then spontaneously you share with your friends. This is what they talk about in spiritual intelligence. They also would first be surprised. Where does SQ come in here? Then you say, yeah, this manager or that accountant or this other person, what she said actually has the flavor of spiritual quotient. It is out of box. It's a notch above EQ. When you would share in the light of your study, you will be actually propagating it. If you go more into it, you can then structure it and make a short workshop also on it. So sky is the limit. Of the three, A.R. Ganti asks a question, of the three IQ, EQ and SQ, which is inherent and which can be developed through study and sadhana? All the three are inherent in us. We are the inheritors of all kinds of intelligence, but at a given point of time, very little of it may be tapped. So by study and sadhana, all of them can be tapped. And Adhyatma and Atma are just related. Something related to Atma is Adhyatma. Atma Sambandhi is Adhyatma. Where Arjuna falls in SQ. Oh, because he was overpowered by emotions, I, me and mine. Therefore his SQ took a back seat. Can you recommend a spiritual practice that enhances SQ? I already did. Here and there, just bring yourself to the present moment. Just sit and say, I'm not going to remember even spiritual things that I've read or heard. I'm going to sit in my backyard and look at the leaves of the tree, look at the water of the swimming pool. I'm going to just look at the town below. I know your house, how there's a view of the town below. Look at those. Keep the mind with whatever senses are perceiving. Do not encourage memory to bring anything. Then you will find that that is a spiritual practice. To live in the present facilitates the usual stuff to go away and something unusual to rise. All right, last question perhaps in the text, Prashant Ranade. What's the difference between EQ and SQ? Is EQ a subset of SQ? Yeah, that's a good answer. EQ taken out of box becomes SQ. So in that sense, EQ has certain limitations. That's a subset. SQ is a superset. That's a one good way of saying. So I guess unless Vibhaji notices anybody who has raised the hand, today no one spoke.
Subramaniam,
But Subramaniam asked the question, I guess. But if he wants to, do you want to ask verbally another question, Dr. Boyaredi?
No, Swamiji. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, you asked by text also. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jyoti Chede wants to ask, I think. Is your mic working? Interestingly, this graphic here doesn't show your mic at all, neither on nor off. My mic has disappeared in this table here.
She's on phone, that's why it's not there.
Oh, but will she be able to ask orally, verbally?
No.
Voice-wise?
Mic is not there, so she's not there.
Then it's not possible. That's okay. So you can email me, you can WhatsApp me, you are in touch with me over WhatsApp. All right. So with that, let us bring this to a close. We will have another session on SQ because, to be frank with you, I have studied half of the material which I have with me. I'll read the second half of the material which is with me, reflect on it from the Upanishadic angle, and share with you in another webinar. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om.
Pranam.
Namaste.